Hello and welcome to Eavesdropping at the Movies. I'm Mike.
And I'm Jose.
And today we're talking about Us.
Yes.
Written and directed by Jordan Peele.
Uh-huh.
Well known for the film Get Out, which he made in 2017.
Uh-huh.
Big hit. Daniel Kaluuya. It was this kind of great allegory on race in America. A really original movie. And it went down brilliantly well, and he got the best original screenplay Oscar for it, which was brilliant. His second film is Us, which is... Well, I'll give you what's in the trailer because there are twists and revelations galore in it. It's about this black family. The mother is Lupita Nyong'o. The father is Winston Duke. The kids are Shahadi Wright-Joseph, who's the girl, and Evan Alex, who's the boy. They have a summer holiday on a beach in Santa Cruz, and they're living in a summer house. And a family wearing red jumpsuits shows up outside their door and invades their home, and it turns out they're identical to them. They are doppelgangers, and a kind of an invasion / attack takes place. And I don't really want to say any more because nothing else is really explained in the trailer. There's imagery and kind of things floating around, which once you see the film obviously makes sense. But kind of whether they're real, what they're doing there, how they came to be, all that sort of stuff. That is in the realm of spoiler territory. That's
well, there'll be spoilers ahead. Let's just get rid of...
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
so
let's just say from now on, spoilers.
It is expected that you've seen the film if you're listening to this, because there is no way of discussing it without that. So, But what I would say, apropos of nothing, is it's really good and really interesting. I would say it's... Having seen it twice now, because I saw it once without you last week, I would say it is inferior to Get Out.
It is.
But... still interesting, and I'm looking forward to talking about it.
Okay, I
no spoilers ahead now. So
yeah, I didn't like it as much as Get Out. I didn't think it was as well worked out or as well thought through as Get Out, though it's possible that I might have missed something. Yeah, I thought some things were just not worked through enough for me. I didn't get them.
I think it has kind of depth in a sense that Get Out didn't. I think the central difference between the two of them, in a way, they're both working in allegorical ways. Horror is this genre. They're both horror movies, obviously. And the horror is this genre where people are very aware these days that you can make a kind of deep and interesting social commentary through it. People are used to talking about things like the zombie films of the 1960s and the kind of alien invasion movies of the 1960s as kind of unwitting allegories for the American paranoia of communism.
Yes.
Okay. So. And it's always been sort of suggested, well, they didn't know they were making that allegory at the time, but if you read it in that way, it's there. And as people got more and more used to this, it becomes something that people really build into what they're making.
Yeah, I'm not sure they didn't build it into it then, to be honest.
I agree,
right.
to be honest. But Jordan Peele certainly is working in that way.
Yeah, he is.
But
I don't think it's just worked through.
No, I agree.
As Get Out. I mean, I didn't understand the whole underground... so basically the premise is that everybody has a doppelganger, and, that there are people living upstairs, so to speak, that are enjoying all the benefits of the world. And
that's us, that's the normal people.
That's us. And then that there are people imprisoned downstairs that are just like them, but actually living these really restricted zombie-like lives where, they're engaging in the same kind of movements and actions and... and they get married and they have children just like the people above, but they're living like this half life. Now, I didn't think that was worked through because, if you think that there's an underclass or something, then you'd have them working or exploited, right? But this is just like they're being denied light and life. So it kind of half works as an allegory, but it doesn't quite.
Yeah.
I didn't understand the whole thing about the rabbits.
No, the rabbits... There is imagery in the film which I think is quite effective, but there's imagery that isn't. And I think the rabbits that is the least effective imagery, because I think it's really heading for something symbolic. but I don't know what it is. And that just the fact that I don't know what it is doesn't mean it's not meaningful, obviously. But I haven't worked it out, and I kind of have a sort of interpretation for other things. The rabbits, I can kind of get at a kind of there's millions of them, and they're identical, and they're kind of useful, but they have no lives really, and there's maybe like a cloning thing. It's very difficult to get much of a grip on it, though.
Yeah. I mean, you get a sense that, yes, they're breeding and fucking and anonymous and, you know, and tested maybe for medical...
And kept in cages.
So...
But
it's not worked through.
Imagery that I would say really stuck with me and really worked for me is Hands Across America. That stuck with me the first time.
Yes.
And it kept on sort of the second time, because I think what's really interesting about Hands Across America was this thing which, for anyone who might not know, happened in 1986. And if you didn't know it really happened, you'd probably say that's nuts, someone made that up. It was a charity-driven event which said we're going to get everyone, or well, enough people to hold hands across America from one coast to the other in this unbroken chain showing unity, and it will also raise lots of money for Africa. That's because it was all
it for Africa? I thought it was for the homeless.
And it didn't entirely reach across America. Never mind the fact that there's Alaska and Hawaii to think of. It didn't even reach across like the southern states. I mean, that's kind of impossible. But something like 6.5 million people took part in this thing, and
yes,
it really
I remember it. I remember it taking place. Yeah.
And what the film reference. In fact, this is the first thing that the film references, really, because the film starts off looking at a television in the 1980s, and it shows a sort of advertisement / promo for this upcoming event, Hands Across America. There's a T-shirt of Hands Across America, and you see this kind of logo.
Yes.
And then, in the present day, when these kind of subterranean doppelgangers breach the surface and come up and kind of start to take their place, or whatever you might consider it, they all link hands, and the final shot of the film is this kind of long chain of people in red jumpsuits stretching across hills and mountains, and it's directly referenced. It's not just like an accident. It's the person who's organised this, who is known as Red, which is one of the two characters Lupita Nyong'o plays. She directly, it's clear that she was inspired to do this by the fact that she woke up with this T-shirt on, had this logo. It became the centre of this kind of mural of scissors, which again is another thing that they all use. So it's like it's not an accident that they're all holding hands. It's a performance. It's meant to mean something. It's very deliberate that this is being done by them when they come to the surface.
There's a connection to the Michael Jackson video, the Thriller video, which the girl wins or the girl's father wins in an amusement park, and then which they all wear. Yeah, so they all wear red jumpsuits, which is what Michael Jackson wore in the Thriller video.
Was it a jumpsuit? Was it just an outfit? It was
it might
certainly
have been
red.
an outfit, but it was red.
Certainly red, yeah.
So there's a connection there anyway.
And this imagery of Hands Across America really spoke to me in the context of this, because this is a film that's clearly about an underclass, a difference between a class and an underclass, and there is exposition that tries to lay this out. This is where the film is at its weakest, which is where it doesn't really explain things. It does a little bit through exposition, and even then you're just left not knowing enough. So there's this central scene of exposition towards the end where Red confronts Adelaide, who is the surface counterpart, and explains what she's doing and what this means, and who the people in Red, the underground people, she calls the tethered. They're known as the tethered, and there's this idea of, well, this is what she says. This place, this underground place where all the tethered come from, this place was built by humans as a means to control the people above, as a kind of experiment. Now, what that means and exactly how that works is really not explained, and I think that is a kind of weakness, because you are left going, okay.
Yeah.
But
it is a weakness.
It is a weakness.
It doesn't make sense. I mean,
But
in a very loose allegory, it works. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, they're tethered, they're chained. You don't get a sense, actually, that they're exploited, though. It's not as if they're made to work.
This is where I had the trouble with it. You kind of go, they are, as you say, kind of physically restricted. They don't move with the grace of people above and this sort of thing, and they're left to eat raw rabbit all day instead of nicely cooked meals and this sort of thing. But you don't understand how this means of control operates. You don't understand how how their existence would in any way control what happens on the surface. So
yes,
and the idea is that they were abandoned, and
yes.
this kind of revenge has taken a long time to happen.
I don't think the film is anywhere near as good as Get Out, and there are things that I'm trying to kind of work out, and they don't quite make sense to me. I mean, I also didn't see the connection between the white family and the black family. I mean, I thought something was going to be made of it. In some senses, I suppose it is. The white family is more materialistic and superficial than the black family. But I think there has to be more than that, right?
Yeah, well, they have more. But just to finish the point about Hands Across America, just so we've set up this idea, this underclass and this above class that benefits from their existence somehow. The imagery that catches me with the Hands Across America thing is there's a contradiction in it. There's lots of duality going on in this movie, and it's all quite deliberate. And there's this kind of central duality going on in Hands Across America where everyone is joined, and that's beautiful. On the other hand, it literally divides America in two. And in fact, the logo shows the two halves of America in different colours. There's blue on top and white below. And then when it's the tethered doing it, there's this imagery of prison chain gangs brought into it as well, which really directly speaks to this idea of an underclass kind of scene. So that imagery really stuck with me, which, as I say, the rabbit stuff didn't work. That to me really worked. The idea that the film is covered in mirrors, and very often when a film, especially a horror film, uses so many mirrors, I'm like, ugh, come on. But in this, it makes complete sense. You're constantly looking for who's who. There's a shot from above when the family goes to the beach where you see their shadows elongated by the harsh sun, and it's like these. Again, it's this kind of idea of duality. Like there's them, and their shadows go with them all the time, and the shadows are bigger than them and quite threatening in a way. Well, let's get on to. I think you were heading towards the issue of race with the difference between the white family and the black family.
That's right. I just think that. I expected it to be more significant. And actually, I just kind of... Again, I didn't get it. Right? So if you're giving the other family so much space, I imagine you want to make a statement. And I just kind of wasn't sure what that statement was.
I think there is something going on with what you say about there being heavily materialistic, much more so than the other family. Although you have got the father in the black family, Winston Duke, who's talking about, he had to get that nice car to rub it in my face and stuff, and he wants the boat. He's really he likes his boat. And but you're right. The other family lives in this beautiful place, and they have this Alexa type voice activated assistant that plays music for them, and they're just living in this kind of these separated. You've got the woman above, the man below. They clearly hate each other. You've established that beforehand in the film, and they're just kind of living in their own little places, their own little isolated. World.
And she's had plastic surgery, Elizabeth Moss.
Yes, that's right.
I must say she looks wonderful, and she gives a wonderful performance, quite eerie and visually striking. But I just didn't get the point of the characters.
We should establish the characters had plastic surgery. We're not necessarily talking about Elizabeth Moss.
That's right. So I thought too much space was given to the character, and yet the payoff is not something that I quite get at the moment.
Well, I think it might have something to do with Jeremiah 11:11, which I looked up. We looked up on the way back because it's a Bible verse that is name checked directly in the film. This kind of creepy homeless guy's holding this sign that says it, and so you're being cued to look at it. And Jeremiah 11:11 says, this is according to the King James Bible. Other Bibles are available. Therefore, thus saith the Lord, Behold, I will bring evil upon them, which they shall not be able to escape. And though they shall cry unto me, I will not hearken unto them. And Jeremiah was a guy who preached against apostasy, and preached against kind of worshipping false idols and things like this. And I think there's a very clear relationship between that and the kind of the all-knowing Ophelia, the virtual assistant, as I said, and the kind of materialistic way of life of the white family.
Well, there's no question that the white family...
a world devoid of faith.
There's no question that the white family is materialist in those ways. But so is the black one.
Yeah.
So, kind of...
It may be emphasised in the white family.
Sorry?
Maybe emphasised in the white family.
I know, but if you're going to make that contrast, and again, if you're going to make one of them white and the other one black, and I just expected more of a payoff, right? Than you're materialistic and you're going to die a horrible death, and I won't spare you. And also in relation to the films, what you discover about the film later, it made sense. It's just I was hoping there would be more to it.
More substance.
Yes.
Yeah, I get what you mean, and I tend to agree.
So, and also the thing that I liked best about the film, where I thought it really became kind of poetic and rather beautiful and evocative, was the scene where the Lupita Nyong'o character meets her doppelganger, and you realize that kind of, part of the way that they bonded, got attached, got switched, was through dance, right? And, that this whole fight between them is choreographed through a kind of abstract dance, actually, right?
Yeah.
And I thought that was like really kind of, beautiful, actually. It's kind of like a moment of poetry in the film. And it's a kind of a visual poetry as well. It's choreographed, and it has very harsh mechanical movements, but in which they are kind of dancing together. I mean, she's dancing with her other self. Though thinking about it afterwards, it didn't quite make sense, because actually the zombie doppelganger should have been the one who had the more fluid movement rather than...
Yeah, well, the idea is that they were switched at the age of 8 or 9.
Yes.
And and by this point in the film, they're in their 30s.
Yes.
So the one who was previously on the service has grown up underground for a very long time, and that's when she was doing dance as well. So she's the one who ends up with the kind of mechanical movements. It's kind of speculation to say like what the reality of the things going on in the film would be.
Well,
but it kind of makes sense to me in a way that she is the one who moves a little bit less gracefully. She moves more mechanically. I think what's interesting...
I don't agree. You're defending it.
Yeah.
But actually, I really don't agree, because the film has a whole system of showing the differences between the doppelgangers and the ordinary people, and it actually has to do with how they move.
Yes, but I think the film kind of suggests about its own world that it's more nurture than nature in that sense, because otherwise you're right. I think like if it were nature that kind of defined it, then the one who is underground previously from the surface would be the one with the more fluid movements, and it's not. So I think the film is one of the more interesting things I think the film is doing is actually drawing such a parallel between these two worlds. It says they are the same. I think it's possible. So, did you guess the twist that they were switched?
Yes.
Did you guess it to the point where you thought like this is definitely it, or just a possibility? I was aware of the possibility rather than saying I reckon this is it.
Well, I suppose you have to ask about when.
Yeah.
I reckon that was a possibility from the beginning. And then obviously the film shows you that it is.
Yeah, I was pretty much the same way. So like I wasn't watching the film, obviously this is the first time, second time I was quite aware. I wasn't watching the film thinking, no, this is definitely it, and kind of looking for things to kind of reinforce that view or whatever, or to just in relation to it. So I was never kind of so convinced. I just thought maybe this is the way the film will go. And the twist really complicated what I thought. And actually, the first time I saw it, I sat in the cinema through most of the credits thinking about it, because it made it very, very unclear what I should think, which I loved. So like I'm sitting there thinking, so who is the villain here? The whole time you've been very clearly thinking the tethered are villains in this. They are the guy. They are. Although you see, you hear Red's kind of defences of what she's doing, and you hear her when she first invades the home. She tells this story of two girls, one of whom has all the good things in life, one of whom is the same but has twisted versions of all that, which is the two versions of Lupita Nyong'o's character that she's describing. So she has a kind of defence for what she's doing, but clearly they're meant to be villains. They are the attackers, and the people on the surface have no idea what's going on, and they are the innocents.
And lots of people get killed.
So you think, and lots of people get killed by them. So, and they are obviously kind of portrayed as these, creepy horror villains. They're all dressed in these creepy jumpsuits. They're holding scissors in weird ways. They're being very threatening and so on. So when you get to the end and there's this twist, it kind of made me go. But also, Lupita Nyong'o, also Adelaide, although she started off underground and took the place of Red on the surface, she's, I don't think, a villain either. Because if you started off living underground, you would want to escape. That's the one thing you'd be keen to do, even if it meant sacrificing someone else. Like, I totally get it. And I kind of think what I really loved is the film shows a system that makes everybody a victim in a way.
Well, okay, yes. I mean, allegorically fine. But the thing is, I think the film really cheats too much. And it's because it hasn't worked it out properly. The screenplay is not worked through. So, for example, I would have expected the Lupita Nyong'o character to have signaled her awareness and her knowledge of what's happening much earlier, because she comes from that world. She knows what's going on, right? And and that's not signaled to the audience at all.
Yeah, I agree. I have read like one or two takes which suggest that Adelaide is not aware of what's going on and has repressed memories, because you see these memories kind of flash up. But I don't think that's not my take on it, because I think that what those takes do is they pick up on the PTSD child counsellor scenes where so she was lost at this fairground. She comes back, unbeknownst to the parents, she's switched, and she's not talking. So
the parents think she has a trauma, but the fact is that the girl's not talking because she doesn't know anything and she hasn't yet worked out.
And she doesn't know how to talk. I mean, you see, no one from the below world is able to speak. They all go, ugh!
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So at the time she can't talk, and the parents going, what's going on? And there's all this talk about her having PTSD from some traumatic event that they don't know what happened. And what all these takes are doing, I think, is taking that literally. But I think the point is that that's just what the parents and the counsellor think. She doesn't have PTSD, and it seems to me quite clear that she's aware of everything. She doesn't forget anything.
That's right. So for it not to be signalled that actually the film would have been much more interesting if she was aware of something that the audience at that point wasn't, but that the audience could then make sense of her behavior earlier. Yeah, the same way, for example, that, when Red comes in, she asks the Adelaide to chain herself to the table. And then you realize that that's what she had made the other little girl do when they made the first switch. So those things kind of then make sense subsequently.
Yeah, she had that done to her.
Yeah. So they could have done something, that would have signaled later on that that she knew what was happening.
Yeah, or just some look that would make sense
later. Yeah,
because having seen it twice now, the second time fully in the knowledge of the two women's identity, I was looking for all of that stuff. I was looking for the things that you go, oh, that was a clue.
Yeah.
Or that was a little moment that makes sense now in context. And there was very little of that, which was quite disappointing.
Oh yes,
actually most of the film, I don't think it cheats in that sense, but it just doesn't do anything in that sense. It just lets it go, which to me,
by not doing anything, it kind of cheats, because you know that she knows, right?
Yeah, I guess that's a way of thinking about it. It could do more in that sense, and it was. This is a kind of difference in a way between it and Get Out, because in Get Out, once you know the twist, the second time you see the film, everything is recontextualized in really interesting ways, and you get it. Yeah. Like the whole kind of interactions at the party, where you've got the one guy who, the black guy who Daniel Kaluuya's character recognises and kind of sees, oh, there's another brother here, gets say hi to him, and then he's acting in a really weird way and kind of performing for all the white people around him. You go, that doesn't make any sense. The second time makes perfect sense. You completely understand what's happening. There's very little of that in this, which is an issue, and it's an issue in this film as well that so much of it is just a long fight / chase / kind of survival. I think for me, all of that lulls. Really, I think it starts off quite interesting in a real funny games kind of way, with this weird home invasion, which is at once incredibly threatening and at another point, sort of, or in another way, kind of polite. Like they're not directly physically threatening them; they're just in control of the situation. This sort of thing, like that's all really interesting.
The film's a mess, you know. So it's enjoyable to watch, and it's got a very neat central idea, but it's a mess. It leaves you with all these questions. For example, at the end, where is the family going to? Right? You seem to see that the tethered people have taken over. So where are they going to? Where is safety? Where's escape? Right? Like
Well, they were talking about Mexico. They mentioned Mexico at one point.
Yeah.
The question of whether these tethered people are only Americans or whether they are everywhere across the world.
There's lots of stuff you don't know. And actually, there's no reason not to know it. A better screenplay would have signaled those horizons, would have created that world that made sense. What you get here is bits of the world make sense, and lots of bits don't. And, kind of there are these poetic passages, that kind of are very intriguing and work very well. And the rest is just kind of like an extended chase scene between you and your doppelganger.
Which isn't visually interesting enough.
Yeah.
I would say that there is lots of potential for interesting, creative filmmaking, essentially, around the doppelgangers.
Yes.
Around kind of what is it like to fight
yourself.
And someone who knows you, thinks like you, all that sort of thing, which they talk about. But the only element of that which I think is kind of interesting filmmaking is the two young boys, and the mirroring of the actions, and the way that the one young boy uses it to lure his opposite into a fiery death.
Yes.
But everything else is just kind of, you could be fighting anyone, really. It's not interesting that they're fighting their opposite, and that's a disappointment. Talking about the idea of where the family are going, and this kind of notion that they have that maybe they're going to Mexico. Obviously, there's not a huge amount to sort of bite onto there because you don't know, but there's a very, I think, important line where when the tethered family is in control in the living room in that first invasion scene, they say, "Who are you?" I think it's Winston Duke who says, "Who are you?" And Red says, "We're Americans." And that, on the one hand, that seems like a kind of line that's there for effect. I think Jordan Peele does an awful lot of stuff that's just for effect, really, and it's kind of easy to brush it off. Like the way that the very young girl grabs the other young girl's throat. It's obviously it has a function in that she was attacking her to take her place, but the way it happens feels not all that meaningful. It feels like it's done for a shock effect, for its own sake. And this line about "we're Americans" feels just like a cute line, but actually I think it's quite important because for one thing, there's a duality, I think, in the title, us / US. Like, I don't think the film is hiding this possibility of seeing the title in two ways and its hands across America.
Yes.
It's a film talking about American society. And I think I was really looking for kind of direct allegory to racial tension in America in this film, because I was expecting it from Get Out, which is very directly about that. And I think and also kind of it's about a black family, and you're aware of Jordan Peele's previous work, so I'm looking for it. And the opening intertitle to this film, before the action starts, talks about underground tunnels. There are thousands of miles of underground tunnels in America, it says.
Yes.
These are disused railroads, these are this, that and the other, sewers and all this sort of stuff. Many of them we don't even know what they're for. And
That's right, I'd forgotten about that.
And the idea is that then later you realise that this is where all the tethered live. This is where they've come from, because they're not just under Santa Cruz, you get the impression they're under all of America. That's why there are these thousands of miles all across America. But the first thing I thought of when I saw that the first time, I thought of the Underground Railroad, which obviously was not a literal underground railroad. It was the network of kind of safe houses and routes that escaped slaves were able to use to escape to the north, to escape their slavery. And so although the film then doesn't go on to, I think, directly approach the idea of race. I think it is making a link between the underclass of America and the black population of America.
Yes.
In quite a general sense, and it's not really shouting it at you, but I think you pick up on that link, I think.
Yeah, you do. And again, I mean, I suppose this is where I wish that the film were more worked through and better worked through. Because, like, the thing is that the difference between just having an interpretation and saying, oh, this is a potential link, or this is something interesting that could be there, or, you know, one might interpret it with this, is that actually you want to layer your interpretation onto patternings of, you know, things in the film that kind of, you know, help construct a kind of, you know, a solid structure for a particular theme. And the thing is that these things are there, but they're quite loose.
Yes.
You know?
They are.
So, you know...
well, that is something I both like and dislike about the film. Like, I don't completely throw it away. What I like is that the film does open itself up to, I think, a range of interpretations and a range of ways of looking at it, depending on what symbolism you want to pick up on, what imagery you want to pick up on, and how. In a way that I think that Get Out is very much more saying, like, this is the way the film is supposed to come across.
Well, that's right.
And that's it. And, you know, so in a way, like, Get Out is... more coherent in that sense, is making a more coherent statement.
Yes.
But I like the kind of... there's a certain audacity of the attempt to draw in so many things into this. And I don't think the film is attempting to make everything completely coherent, but it is... I think it's happy to use imagery in kind of undefined ways and allow you to draw your own conclusions or pick out what you want to pick out and pick your own interpretations.
Well, you're being more generous because I think it is definitely doing that. But for me, it's just a problem that it's not coherent. Right? Because, you know, kind of, I mean, it could be this, it could be that. You could say this, you could say that. You know, it might mean this, it might mean that. Right? So I kind of... And then there are things in the film that contradict it. You know? So I don't like that. I feel it's kind of lazy and, you know, and not worked through, not thought through, you know. So kind of there's a lot of ideas that are chucked in, but they're not systematic. They're not coherent.
No, I can appreciate that, and that's one way. That's another way of looking at it. That's I mean, you know, I don't entirely disagree with it. I'm not saying like, well, you're wrong for thinking that. It's perfectly possible to come out of this and go, I think it's all over the shop.
Well, I can see what you're saying as well, and I just think you're offering a more generous view of it.
Yeah.
You know, and I don't deny that those things are there and that they resonate. They do. You know, I just wish that that resonance were enhanced by patternings, you know.
Yeah. I mean, what I would say is that if I thought that that's what the film was trying to do, or if that's what I wanted from the film, like you do, then having watched it twice, it doesn't, like, none of that would become any clearer the second time.
Yes.
It's not a film, and this is to the film's detriment, especially with a film that has a big twist in it. It's not a film that I think offers much more substance the second time. Like I say, the stuff that you know, the idea of the twist recontextualizing things that you've seen previously is not really present in this. You're just kind of you are aware, but it doesn't make substantial differences to what you see. You know. And the idea of you know, as you say, kind of patternings or interpretations becoming more concrete, for me, was not my experience watching it the second time just now.
My feeling about the film was that it has a wonderful concept. Right, you know, I love the concept of it, and actually, kind of, you know, the US hands across America, the things that you've described, that, you know, and actually those link up really neatly. I love that. I also love that it has some kind of, you know, some moments that are both conceptually poetic and also visually poetic. I did love the dance between.
It's wonderful, that final sort of fight.
That's a great moment.
The way it's intercut.
Yeah. So that's a great moment of cinema, actually, really. I like the twist, and I love Lupita Nyong'o.
She is unbelievable.
Yeah, she's great. It's a great star performance. She's riveting. You can't help looking at her.
And can we talk about her for a second? Because I think it's not just that she's great, which is easy to say, but I mean, the difference in the two performances that she gives is astonishing.
Yes.
You know, like she has, we were talking about kind of fluidity and grace of movement. Well, she completely encapsulates that. The idea is that she, as a young child, her characters were dancers. And as you said, you see them dancing when they're young, and they dance in these different ways. And that kind of form of movement carries through to her adult self.
Yeah.
So so her Adelaide, the one who lives on the surface, moves very gracefully, and you see at one point when she's in front of the window in the bedroom with Winston Duke. You know, even though she's not dancing at that point, she has this little dancer sort of toe movement, which is very subtle, but it's there, and there's grace and everything. On the other hand, Red moves quite mechanically, but not stiffly, right? It's like it's graceful mechanical movement. If you know, I can't think of a better way to explain it than that. Like, you have to see it really to get the sense of that. Like, it is, she has this grace. She moves kind of smoothly, but robotically, and it's not. And then it's not only the physical movement. I mean, the facial performance.
She looks very different playing each character.
Yeah.
Which I think is kind of an achievement, because it is all kind of facial movement, and actually, obviously, the voice as well is very important.
Yeah.
There's a lot of voice work, and she's very interesting.
Red's voice is very hoarse.
Yeah, again, I think the film cheats on that, really. To give that kind of zombie, half screech, half really bass voice.
But I think there is a sense in which it makes sense to me. The film is using a creepy voice, but the film does put context in to make it make sense, I think.
Well, to me it doesn't, because, this is a child who came into language, in the upper world. So, you would expect her to talk, maybe differently. She has been tethered now for 30 years or whatever, or 25 years. But actually, you either make a distinction that the other tethered people can't speak at all, and she can speak, though now her voice has been lost, or kind of you make her more fluid because she is somebody who came into language in the upper world. I did think that those things weren't worked through.
To me, the use of her voice, the design of her voice, if you like, makes sense, in the sense of, as you say, she would have spoken when she was a young child living in the upper world, and then living in the tethered world, no one else can speak. She would have had no reason or opportunity to speak.
Yeah, but she wouldn't have lost what.
Well, her voice being essentially kind of out of practice. I also think the film is trying to make something of the hands around her throat. It's obviously the Adelaide strangled her to get her underground, and you see when she wakes up in that bed, when she's chained to the bed underground, she grabs at her throat, which not grabs at it, but just kind of, my throat hurts. And so I think the film is trying to draw on that, and I think it's a little too far to describe it as a cheat. It is building in some context for the use of the creepy voice, but it is also trying to use a creepy voice because it's creepy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would say that's the main reason. But anyway, let's not detract from, how great Lupita Nyong'o is. It's a great performance, actually. So it's both a great star performance, like you can't take your eyes off her, and it's also a great performance. It's kind of, the voices, the gesture, the looks, the stands, everything.
The technicalities of the performance
is worked through, so that's lovely to see.
And I would say not in a way that we've talked about kind of technical actors before being kind of cold and you're seeing the technique. Yeah. I think what's really remarkable about this is you do see all the technique. It's completely on the surface for you, but you feel everything. You see everything.
Yeah.
You don't feel like, oh, there's technique and isn't that very clever? Like, you get it, you feel it, and these people are different characters, and they are lived characters. It's fantastic.
So I hope this film kind of moves her up to a different level of stardom, because
she's already huge.
I know.
She's just not leading huge, I suppose.
Yeah, it's not Angelina Jolie or Julia Roberts huge, So and this definitely shows she can carry this kind of film. So you know.
Can I say a word about Winston Duke as well?
Yes.
Who I think he plays the dad of the family, and I think one of the interesting things about him, for a start, is that he's obviously they've obviously thought like he can't look like M'Baku from Black Panther, because M'Baku is this kind of great warlord warrior who's very and basically if you had M'Baku being the dad in this film, you'd feel like, well, he's never going to get beaten in a fight. And so what they've done is give him like a dad bod and glasses and made him kind of goofy, you know, in a sense of humour and that sort of thing, and like, which I think is wonderful. Like, again, it makes me into a different character, but it's a beautifully embodied, you know, sort of goofy dad type thing who.
Yes. You know what, before I forget, can I interrupt a little bit? Because, you know, one of the things that I also loved about this film is how it's embedded in black culture in ways that we take for granted in other kinds of film. And that, you know, so for example, you know, the family home has a picture of the Alvin Ailey dance troupe. Now, obviously, that has to do with, you know, the child being a dancer or whatever, but it's Alvin Ailey. You know, it's not the New York Ballet or whatever, right?
Yeah.
You know, so it's like this all-black dance New York troupe, very famous, right? So, you know, that whole range of reference from the music to the dancing, you know, was really lovely to see, partly because it makes you realize how unusual it is.
Yes.
You know, so
I think
I appreciated that.
I think the film is building in or kind of drawing on a whole reference to Funny Games, the Michael Haneke film, with as I think I mentioned before, the kind of the weirdness and the stiltedness and the odd kind of construction of the home invasion, and going so far as to the one character taking the other character out onto a boat to kill him, which happens in Funny Games. I think it's also it's even further kind of built upon in the White family's house with their kind of very white, I mean literally white, the colour white, you know, kind of everything is clean and cream and white in that house, and that and kind of beautiful sort of, as you say, very materialistic existence, which is disrupted by blood suddenly filling the carpet and that sort of thing.
Yes.
And there's a point where there's one shot which I think is directly drawing on Psycho, which is in that house where it's the dad character in the White family, who it's his eye and he's splayed out on the floor and the camera attracts towards rather than away from, but it's a similar sort of shot.
Moments that I liked, and you just reminded me of, there are moments of recognition. So there's a moment where the mother stabs one of the white zombies in that house. Right, and she's really like, you know, and then I forget whether it's the boy or the girl, the daughter or the son, who looks at her. Right.
I think the boy comes in the house. It's when she goes back to get the keys. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, the boy comes in.
It's the boy and looks at her.
Yeah.
Right, and it's like, what has my mother become? Has my mother become them? And then, you know, she takes the bloody hand and like high fives, right? So, and I thought that moment jived really neatly with the ending, where he knows his mother is.
Yes, they share that look in
person.
The car.
Yeah.
In the ambulance.
So I loved the way that's set up at the, you know, in that moment, and then there's a payoff later. And I wish actually there had been more of that throughout the film.
Yeah, there is some of that. There are some in more practical senses of, for instance, the thing about the boat always listing to the left, and so when they end up stranded in the water and the boat has gone off, it comes back round. You know, that's been set up in advance. So I want to do things like that, but in the sense that you're talking about in terms of character relationships or kind of meanings in that sense, I can't think of. I mean, maybe there are more. To my mind right now, I can't bring any. But I know what you mean. I think the film does some work in that sense. I think the film has been thought through in some sense in that way. Like, as I say, it is building in all of these kind of dualities and things that can be seen in two ways, or that come back in a recontextualized way. The twins on the beach, this sort of thing, or all of the 11/11s that show up. Yes. These kind of coincidental reappearings. Like, you've got the 11/11, obviously, which is the Jeremiah 11/11, which you see spelled out on the board. You've got the 11/11, which appears on the clock. You've got the girl's Black Flag T-shirt, which has these 4 bars which spell out essentially 11/11. You've got the score on the on the game that Winston Duke is watching, which is 11 all. It's tied, and then right at the very end, as the ambulance drives off, you see it's number 11-11.
Yeah.
You know, or the thing of like the families holding hands, for instance. So at the start, when you see the family driving to their holiday destination, they're introduced with that vinyl that you get on American cars, particularly of the family. You know, the stick figures that they have on the back window, and they are holding hands. Yes. That's the way they are. And then when they show up outside, when the doppelganger family shows up outside, they're all holding hands in the same way.
Yes.
You know, obviously, Hands Across America is doing the same thing. That chain of red paper figures that Red is holding at the end, same thing.
Yes.
Yeah, you brought up the Thriller T-shirt, and I think it's a good one. It's a good point to bring up, and actually, I think that the reference in that is it's more than just it's the 1980s. I think Michael Jackson is in that Thriller video. As you point out, like he starts off a normal, healthy human being and becomes a zombie.
Yes.
And then you've also got this idea that Michael Jackson himself embodies duality more than almost anyone else really in the world. He kind of was two people over the course of his life, and also you've got that in a sense there's the kind of a double life he led in a sense.
Yes.
With I'm not saying it's related to that documentary that came out recently.
Yes.
But the idea of the kind of hidden life that he had.
I think that's one of the measures of how the film is at the moment so good. So Michael Jackson signifies the 80s. So that's a reason to have the Thriller T-shirt. That was like arguably the biggest pop star of the era. But that particular video that the T-shirt is about the zombies. So, it's about kind of, someone being transformed or being tethered, right, to another persona. And then, you're talking about Michael Jackson kind of...
The actual figure.
The person.
Yeah.
Also having at least, two identities, maybe more, really. So you were referencing the documentary about his child abuse or the allegations of his child abuse. But also I think the black-white allegation.
That's the other thing I was getting at, yeah.
Yeah, that kind of, for some people, he was somebody who was whitening himself up, right? And, surgically removing his blackness and so on, right? So it works on all those levels.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting because one of the things that Red talks about in her monologue towards the end is that she talks about this underground kind of experiment being about humans having figured out how to separate the body from the soul, something like that. And she talks about the soul being contained within the two separate people, but it's like the same soul. I can't remember exactly what the line is, but that's the effect of it. And that's why these two people are tethered, and that's why you're tethered to your counterpart. So the idea of there's an idea in that of the duality within everyone, basically, like a kind of something that we hide from ourselves, or something that we, a kind of a dark side and a light side type of thing that it's talking about, rather than. It's talking about a kind of societal duality, the kind of an underclass that supports the upper class and allows it to live and thrive, but also it's saying that I think it's sort of saying that in so doing we damage ourselves, we tear ourselves into, like that's an unhealthy way to be. I mean, that's also it's kind of a leap. The film isn't spelling that kind of thing out, but I think it's something that's there to think about. I think another and this is something else which you brought up, the white family, and kind of what's the point of the white family, and because they don't really seem to be any different or something like that. And I kind of think maybe that's the point. Like, I want to be careful how I phrase this, but when you think about the black family in the film, other than the colour of their skin, what makes them different to the white family?
Well, there are a whole bunch of things that they talk about. So, for example, the idea of them on a boat, right? There are cultural differences that they allude to, Well, I think the point that I'm trying to get at is that actually I think the film is suggesting that there is no real difference, and actually it's by showing few differences between the two of them, the two families that is, it's kind of linking them and saying we're part of the same society. So
and this is where I want to be careful how I phrase it, because I don't want to say it makes the black family white, but in a way it kind of it allows them to have kind of basically a normal life, whereas in another film, you know, the black characters would be really signified as being different in some way, or that their blackness was kind of very important to them. And and it is to some extent in this, particularly when they're listening to the music in the car.
It is very much in this film, actually. So I think I know what you're trying to get at, which is, you know, a thing about affluence and aspirations.
Right, they're all part of the same American society.
They're part of the same consumer culture.
Yes.
Though actually, you know, they're also quite different. Yeah, they're culturally different in terms of references and so on. I think we talked about Alvin Bailey and, you know, kind of all of those things. But on the other hand, you know, there's the consumer culture and the aspirations of it and the limits of that culture and those aspirations is something that they both do share.
Yeah, and so I think that that, you know, if like the conversation that they have around the dinner table, you know, the girl wants to stop running track, the kid wants to do his magic trick or whatever, and the dad wants, and they're going on this kind of holiday to a summer beach home. This is all stuff that it's just kind of treated as very normal, and you have this way of going, well, of course, why shouldn't it be? You know, like, why shouldn't a sort of perfectly normal, affluent African American family have these conversations, have access to all this stuff? But it does feel like it's making a point in terms of the construction of a kind of whiteness and privilege. That I think in doing that, it's trying to draw a distinction across the entire top society, as it were, and the entire bottom society, joining all the top society together. Yeah. I kind of think in doing so, it's actually making it not about race in that way, and it's kind of allegorizing, if that's a term, it's allegorizing the top and bottom thing.
I'm not sure about that. I'm just I'll have to think about that some more. I mean, I think they're trying to make similarities around affluence, though even then the black family says, oh, we couldn't get this good a house, right?
Yeah.
I think there are cultural differences. I think there are little things, you know, when what's the name of the actress who plays the white?
Elizabeth Moss.
Elizabeth Moss was wonderful, but you know, she makes all these little jabs about plastic surgery, and you know, and then there are these looks like, right? So so I think it is the film is trying to make differences. I'm also wondering. My memory is not what it used to be, but I also seem to remember that most of the corpses I can't remember a black corpse, you know.
I don't remember, to be fair. As in a black of a human or a tethered, or does that not matter?
No, the humans, yeah. Right. You know, so because when at the end of the film, and actually throughout the film, you do see all these corpses littering the streets. Yeah. Right. I don't remember seeing any corpses of black people, but you know, that's.
I couldn't tell you, to be honest. I don't remember.
Yeah.
Either.
So, but I do remember seeing, you know, the corpses of white people. So, So I'm just not sure, kind of. And to be honest, I mean, I think the film has certain things really well worked out, and that run through the film and that are kind of systematic and patterned, and then there are others that aren't quite. That I think has to be systematic and patterned. There has to be a reason, you know, there has to be more made of that white family than I am presently getting.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a thinker.
Yeah.
It's all there.
Well, I don't agree that it's all there. I think those things are there, but I think in a more basic level, some things are not worked through in the screenplay and the film suffers for them. So, I would nonetheless still recommend it. I had a very good time, and I think it's quite a good film.
And it's quite interesting to talk about, and I'm glad I saw it twice as well.
Yes, I wouldn't bother.
No. And I think the central reason I would say it's inferior to Get Out, which is superior in all sorts of ways, but the central reason I think it's inferior is that the central conceit, idea, is less original.
Yes.
You know, this is a film ultimately, in some sense or other, depending on how you want to interpret it, about an underclass. And the way in which kind of America relies on this underclass, but treats it badly. We're the same ultimately. This sort of thing. Like I say, this ending where you end up confused. Who's the villain? Is there one? This sort of thing, I think is interesting. But if you compare it to the underlying idea in Get Out, which is about it's not about race. It's about racism, and it's about the idea that there is no racism in America, or what racism looks like now. It just had so many more original, interesting observations and beautifully kind of brought out that is the central reason that I think Get Out is a superior film. But I do think this film is interesting this film has more of a range of interpretations, which I think is interesting. I think the faith interpretation is an interesting one. Jeremiah 11:11 isn't there for no reason. You have when Red reaches the surface and she's talking to Adelaide, she talks about God. She talks about kind of being tested, and that quote from Jeremiah 11:11 about, let me just quickly find it again. I will bring evil upon them with which they shall not be able to escape. Who's that referring to, right? Is that referring to the tethered? Are they the ones having evil brought upon them, which they're not able to escape, but now she is escaping it? Or is it talking about the people on the surface, and the evil is what's being brought by the tethered now, And she has this talk of, like, she was born different, she says. This is what she says in her monologue towards the end. You and I were born different, and I started to see that she gives that dance performance, which all the people on the ground see, and they kind of realise that she is special, and she kind of, remember they all lay hands upon her. There's this image of them all laying hands upon her, and she kind of realising that she is the one who can lead them out of this and formulate this plan. There is this idea of she has a faith, a type of faith, and people on the surface don't. I think there is this general difference, and I think there's an again, it's not like the only interpretation, but there is an interpretation of this film which is to do with the world above being a faithless world and worshipping these false idols, and that this is a kind of form of the apocalypse or judgment day.
Well, I suppose that's true. Those things are there to a degree, but then kind of you leave with all of these corpses strewn around, yes. Zombies holding hands across America.
Thou shalt not kill.
And people, kind of the central family heading off on the road to who knows whom. So I just kind of thought that's not satisfactory.
Fair enough. Well, I can see you will not be pleased by anything I try to any interpretation I try to lay upon this film.
No, I think you've been very interesting, and actually you've made me see a lot of things. But I actually think that none of that refutes my central objections to it.
No, I think that's probably right. It is ultimately a film that doesn't lead you all the way down one path. I would say another thing is, we're talking about this film very kind of allegorically and in terms of what its meanings are. I think that's interesting. I think that's actually a really good thing, for one thing. Like, this is a film which is crying out for you to interpret it, which so many films aren't really, and this film really wants you to, and I think that's great.
Yes. I think the film requires you to read it allegorically. It narrates it in those ways, and, it has very poetic moments that, kind of stand in for different things, right? So, on the, like the dance we were talking about, well, on the one hand, it's a fight between, a Red and Adelaide, right? But on the other hand, it's kind of, it's signifying all kinds of things about, their place in the world and who they were and who they are now. And yeah, it requires to be read allegorically the way that kind of poetry is.
Yeah.
Yeah, so.
But the other thing I would say is if we try and talk about it, ignoring all of that, I don't think it's very scary.
No.
And actually,
and that is a problem.
And that's probably a problem. It's more of an action film in a way. And
well, it's not a very good action. The action is not so good.
I say in a way.
Yeah.
I didn't find it very scary. I didn't find it very scary the first time, and obviously the second time I knew what was coming. And that kind of is and isn't a problem. Like, horror has different forms. It doesn't necessarily have to scare you out of your seat, but it would be nice to have been more creeped out than I was in this.
Yeah, so we're beginning to even make more criticisms. So it wasn't very scary.
Yeah.
It wasn't very exciting. The action wasn't that good, right? So kind of, the most interesting thing about it is
Yeah,
allegorical aspects.
And actually, I did speak to my brother about this on WhatsApp a little bit, and one thing he said was, because Jordan Peele has said he really likes doing horror and he thinks he'll probably do much more of that.
Yeah.
My brother said, like, that's the last thing he wants to hear. Like, obviously, it's wonderful to be able to do social commentary through horror, but why not just do the social commentary and forget all the chasing?
Yes.
You know, I kind of wish he wouldn't be so interested in horror. Is what my brother said.
Well. Yeah.
Like, if
he is, make it creepier and make it scarier.
Well, yeah. But if you want to make an allegory, like, why make an allegory? Just say what you want to say and be more direct. And,
yeah. Anyway,
there's kind of positives and negatives to that point of view as well.
Yes. So let's bring it to a close.
Yeah. So I mean, we agree that it's worth seeing.
Yes.
We don't really agree that it's worth seeing twice.
Yes.
But yeah, I mean, look. The fact is, it's asking questions of an audience to interpret it, and that is no bad thing.
I mean, it's a film that will certainly lead to many interesting discussions, and that on its own is a reason to see it.
Yeah, that's for sure.
All right, so thank you very much. We are Eavesdropping at the Movies, and we are on
iTunes, SoundCloud, and YouTube if you want to listen to us, and leave ratings and stuff, which make us look great to other people. And we're on Twitter and Facebook. The Twitter account is @eavesdropmovies, and the website with all the podcasts is eavesdroppingatthemovies.com.
Right.
Thanks very much. Bye-bye.